In the golden age of Asgard, the gods feasted in halls of splendor, believing their reign eternal. Odin, the All-Father, sat on his high throne, Hlidskjalf, from which he could see all 9 realms. But he did not see peace. He saw shadows. He saw an end. For the Vikings, destiny, weird, was not a possibility. It was an unmovable, terrifying certainty. And no prophecy haunted Odin more than the one whispered by the Volva, the seeress, that the children of his blood brother, the trickster Loki, would one day rise and devour the gods. This is not just a story of monsters. This is the story of how fear itself can forge the weapons of our own destruction. This is the tragedy of Fenrir and Jormungandr, the children of Loki and the architects of Doomsday. Far from Asgard's light, in the dark forests of Jotunheimr, the land of giants, Loki sought companionship not with the gods, but with the giantess Angbodda. Her name meant she who brings sorrow, and she would live up to it. With her, Loki fathered 3 children, a brood that defied the laws of gods and nature. The first was a daughter, Hel. One side of her body was that of a beautiful woman. The other was the rotting, blue-black flesh of a corpse. The second was a serpent, Jormungandr. Even as a whelp, it hissed with a venom that seemed to poison the very air. The third was a wolf, Fenrir. He was, at first, just a pup, but in his eyes there burned an intelligence and a hunger that mirrored his father's chaotic spirit. When word of these children reached Odin, his dread solidified. The Voluspa, the prophecy of the seeress, rang in his ears. He saw a wolf swallowing the sun. He saw a serpent rising from the sea. He saw the end of all things. Driven by this terror, Odin made a decision. He would not wait for destiny to come to him. He would strike first. The gods rode to Jotunheimr, not in peace, but in fear, and they took the 3 children from their mother. It was an act of preemptive aggression, and it was the first thread pulled in the tapestry of their own undoing. Odin stood before the 3 children, the supposed end of his world. He believed he could outsmart fate. He believed he could control the outcome. To Hel, the half-dead girl, he gave dominion over the dead. He banished her to the icy depths of Niflheim, to rule over all who died of sickness or old age. He cast her down, giving her an army of the dishonored, and in doing so, created a powerful queen who would one day march that army against him. Next, he turned to the Serpent, Jormungandr. It was still small, no larger than a viper, but Odin saw the colossal shadow it would cast. He would not chain it. He would not imprison it. He would loose it. Odin, the All-Father, hurled the small serpent from the heights of Asgard into the great ocean that encircled Midgard, the realm of men. He thought the beast would drown, be consumed by the endless black, forgotten. He was wrong. The ocean did not kill Jormungandr. It fed him. In the sunless depths, the serpent grew and grew and grew. He fed on the carcasses of whales and the rage of the deep. He swelled to an impossible size, his scales becoming plates of armor, his fangs becoming daggers of stone. He grew so vast, so impossibly long, that he encircled the entire world of Midgard, clamping his own tail in his colossal jaws. He became the Ouroboros, the world serpent. He was no longer a beast. He was a living boundary of the world, a constant simmering threat lying in wait. For centuries he was a myth, a sailor's nightmare, until he met his destined rival. Thor, the god of thunder, was fishing with the giant Hymir. Frustrated with his small catch, Thor declared he would hunt for whales. When Hymir refused to row further into the deep, Thor, full of arrogance, took the oars. He prepared his own line, an unbreakable chain, and for bait he used the head of Hymir's largest ox. He cast the line. The ocean floor trembled. Something took the bait, something that pulled with the force of a mountain. Thor planted his feet, and the boat groaned, threatening to splinter. He pulled, and the very ocean seemed to pull back. This was no whale. With a roar that split the clouds, Thor engaged in a cosmic tug-of-war. The ocean boiled, waves crashed over the realms, and then a head surfaced. Eyes as green and cold as the abyss, fangs dripping with a black venom that sizzled in the water. Jormungandr, the world serpent, stared at his future killer. And Thor stared back, his knuckles white on the chain, Mjolnir already in his hand. It was the first meeting of arch-enemies. Thor raised his hammer, ready to end the prophecy right there. But the giant Hymir, screaming in pure terror at the sight, cut the line. Jormungandr sank back into the abyss, but the rivalry was sealed in blood. The serpent would not forget the god, and the god, robbed of his kill, would forever hunt the serpent. While the serpent grew in exile, the wolf, Fenrir, was kept in Asgard. He was Odin's paradox. The All-Father was too afraid to kill him, yet too afraid to let him go. So he kept his prophesied killer close, hoping to tame him, to raise him as one of their own. But the gods are not kind masters. Fenrir grew just as his brother had. He grew at an alarming rate. Soon the pup that played in the halls of Asgard was a wolf the size of a horse, then an elephant. His fur was as black as the void, and his claws were like iron. And the gods, they grew afraid. They saw him not just as a creature, but as the living embodiment of their doom. They whispered. They avoided his gaze. They treated him like the monster they expected him to be. All but one. Tyr, the god of war, the bravest, most honorable of the Aesir. Tyr saw not just a monster, he saw a creature. He alone dared to approach Fenrir, to bring him meat, to sit with him, to scratch the thick fur behind his ears. A bond was formed, a fragile, genuine friendship between the god of war and the wolf of prophecy. For a time, it seemed Odin's plan might work. Fenrir, though massive, showed loyalty. He showed intelligence. He was, perhaps, more than the beast of the prophecy. But the fear of the gods was stronger than the loyalty of a wolf. Odin watched Fenrir's muscles ripple, watched his jaws, now large enough to snap a tree, and he knew he could not control this. He had to chain him.
This would be the gods' greatest deception, and their most unforgivable sin. They could not use force. They had to use trickery. They approached Fenrir not with weapons, but with smiles and a challenge. "Fenrir," they said, "we marvel at your strength. We have forged a chain, lathing, and we doubt even you can break it. Will you test your might?" Fenrir, proud and trusting, agreed. He let them bind him. With a simple flex of his shoulders, the chain shattered into 100 pieces. The gods laughed nervously. They forged a second chain, Drumi, twice as thick, made of the finest steel. "Surely," they said, "this one will hold you?" Fenrir looked at them, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes, but he agreed again. He let them bind him. He strained the muscles in his haunches, knotting like boulders. The ground shook, and with a mighty heave, Drumi exploded, the links flying like shrapnel. The gods were no longer laughing. They were terrified. Odin turned to the dwarves, the master smiths of Svartalfheim. He tasked them to create an impossible bond, and they did. They forged Gleipnir. It was not a chain of iron. It was a ribbon, soft as silk. It was made from the 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. It was a magical fetter, thin as thread, but stronger than any steel. The gods brought Gleipnir to Fenrir on a remote island. "One last test," they said, their voices light. "A magic ribbon. If you cannot break this, you are clearly no threat, and we will set you free." Fenrir stopped. He looked at the silken ribbon, and he looked at the gods. He saw their forced smiles. He saw the sweat on their brows. He smelled their fear. And for the first time, he understood. This was not a game. This was a cage. "I do not trust this," the wolf's voice rumbled, intelligent and deep. "It looks like a trick. I will not be bound by this unless one of you places your hand in my mouth as a pledge of good faith. If this is a trick, you will lose your hand." The gods froze. They looked at each other, their bravado gone. They knew it was a trick. And then Tyr, the god of war, stepped forward. His face was a mask of sorrow. He looked at Fenrir, the creature he had fed, the friend he had known, and he made his choice. He placed his right hand, his sword hand, into the massive jaws of the wolf. The other gods quickly, eagerly wrapped Gleipnir around Fenrir. The wolf strained, he pushed, he pulled, but the magical ribbon only tightened. He was held fast. He could not break it. He was trapped. A terrible sound began in his throat, not a growl, but a cry of profound, agonizing betrayal. He looked at the gods, who were now laughing, celebrating their victory. He looked at his friend, Tyr. Tyr did not laugh. He simply closed his eyes and awaited the price. Fenrir clamped his jaws shut. The god screamed, but it was drowned out by the wolf's roar of pure, unadulterated hatred. The gods had their monster. They had taken a proud, intelligent creature, and through their own cowardice and deceit, had forged him into the very thing they feared. They dragged the roaring wolf to a desolate rock, anchored Gleipnir to the center of the earth, and jammed a sword in his mouth to silence his howls. And there they left him, bound by betrayal, starving, dreaming only of one thing: revenge, dreaming of Ragnarok. The betrayal was complete. Fenrir, the friend, was gone, and Fenrir, the monster, was born. This is one of the most powerful tragedies in all of mythology, and we are only halfway through our story. If you appreciate this deep dive into the lore, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the bell icon. Your support allows us to tell these epic tales. Now, let us return to the Nine Realms.
Years passed. Fenrir raged in his chains, and Jormungandr slept in the sea. But the prophecy was not finished with him. Thor, on a journey with Loki, came to the castle of a giant king named Utgard the Loki. This king, a master of illusions, challenged the gods to a series of tests to prove their worth. Thor, ever boastful, was given what seemed like simple tasks. He failed them all. He lost a drinking contest. He lost a wrestling match to an old woman. And most humiliatingly, he was challenged to lift the king's house cat. Thor scoffed. A cat. He slid his arm under the great tabby's belly and lifted. The cat did not move. Thor, gritting his teeth, used both arms. He lifted with all his divine strength, the muscles in his back straining to the breaking point. The castle floor cracked under the strain. He could not lift the cat. He only managed to make it raise one of its paws from the floor. He was shamed. But the next day, as they left the castle, Utgard the Loki revealed the truth. It was all an illusion. The horn Thor failed to drink from, its other end was in the ocean, and he had drunk so much he had created the world's first tides. The old woman he wrestled, that was Ellie, old age itself, which no god can ever defeat. And the cat? When you lifted that cat's paw, the giant said, his voice full of a newfound terror, we were all undone. For that was no cat. That was Jormungandr, the world's serpent. You lifted the beast so high that his back touched the sky. You, Thor, are terrifyingly strong. Thor was enraged at the trickery, but the encounter proved the prophecy. The serpent was now a force of nature, a cosmic entity, his equal in every way. The final battle was not a matter of if, but when.
And then the end began. Thimblewinter. 3 winters of endless snow, with no summer between. The sun grew dim. The moon was devoured by a wolf of the sky. The bonds that held the world together began to snap. In his prison, Fenrir felt the magic of Gleipnir weaken. He surged. The ribbon, once unbreakable, tore apart like wet paper. He was free. His howl of vengeance was so loud it split the sky. His lower jaw dragged on the ground. His upper jaw scraped the heavens. He was no longer a wolf. He was a gaping maw of annihilation, devouring everything in his path. At the same moment, in the black ocean, Jormungandr awoke. He rose from the sea in a tidal wave of fury. The oceans of the world emptied onto the land, a great flood of devastation. He advanced onto the battlefield of Vigridr, his brother's new ally, his body coiling like a mountain range, his black venom spewing forth, poisoning the air, the water, and the sky. The children of Loki, the outcasts, the monsters forged by fear, had returned to end the world that had rejected them. Loki himself, now free, sailed a ship made of fingernails of the dead, with his daughter Hel's army of corpses at his back. Odin looked upon the field. He saw the wolf. He saw the serpent. The prophecy had not been a warning. It had been a script, and they had all played their parts perfectly. The battle was joined. God against giant, light against dark. Thor saw his nemesis, Jormungandr. Ignoring the chaos around him, the god of thunder charged, his hammer held high. Their final battle commenced. It was a storm of poison and lightning.
Thor was a blur of motion, Mjolnir crashing against the Serpent's armored scales, while Jormungandr lashed out, leveling battalions of gods and giants with every strike. With a final, desperate scream of rage, Thor leapt into the air and brought Mjolnir down upon the Serpent's skull, crushing it. The world's Serpent was dead. The field was silent for a breath. Thor stood victorious. He had done it. He took one step, 2, 3, and then a torrent of Jormungandr's venom, unleashed in its death throe, washed over him. Thor choked, Mjolnir slipping from his grasp. He staggered. 4 steps, 7, 8, 9. The god of thunder fell dead, drowned in the poison of his greatest foe. Across the field, Odin, on his 8-legged steed Sleipnir, charged at his destiny. He charged at Fenrir. But this was not the wolf that Tyr had fed. This was an avalanche of teeth and betrayal. Before the All-Father could even raise his spear, the wolf's jaws opened and consumed him. Odin, the king of Asgard, was gone, devoured. Fenrir howled, not in victory, but in endless, consuming rage. But his triumph was short-lived. A figure stepped from the shadows. Vidar, Odin's silent son, the god of vengeance. On his foot he wore a massive boot crafted from all the scraps of leather cut by cobblers throughout time. He said nothing. He walked into the wolf's open maw, planted his magical boot on Fenrir's lower jaw, and grabbed the upper. With the strength of a god fueled by grief, Vidar tore the wolf in half. The great beast was silenced. The betrayed son and the father he had killed were avenged.
The gods fell. The giants fell. The world was consumed by fire and then drowned by the sea. The age of the Aesir was over. But we are left with the question: were Fenrir and Jormungandr born evil? Was it their nature to be the world's enders? Or were they simply children? Children who were feared. Children who were cast out. Children who were betrayed by the very gods who should have protected them. Jormungandr was thrown into an abyss, and so he became the abyss. Fenrir was treated like a monster, bound by lies and treachery, and so he became the monster. Odin's desperate attempt to escape the prophecy became the very tool that sharpened its blade. He did not prevent Ragnarok. He merely ensured that when it came, his enemies would be fueled not just by destiny, but by a righteous, burning, and personal hatred. The story of Loki's children is a tragedy. It teaches us that fear is a poor counselor, that destiny is often a chain we forge for ourselves, and that sometimes the greatest monsters are not born, they are made. But what do you think? Were Fenrir and Jormungandr truly victims of prophecy? Or was their destructive nature inevitable? Was Odin a wise king trying to save his people? Or a tyrant
who created his own enemies. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one.